بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله وسلم عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، قال شيخ الإسلام محمد بن عبد الوهاب رحمه الله تعالى في كتاب الكبائر باب ما جاء في كثرة الكلام. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So inshallah we'll begin from where I've just read in Arabic. This is a new lesson, a new chapter in the book that we're studying at the moment, which is the book of major sins. And this speech, so talking a lot, and this chapter is entitled talking a lot, or somebody who talks a lot without thinking, and it follows on from what we were going through last week. So inshallah, let's continue and go through the verses and the evidences and the explanation, inshallah. So the Shaykh, he says, وَقَوْلُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَإِنَّ عَلَيْكُمْ لَحَافِظِينَ. And he's referencing the ayah that comes after as well. So let's just have a look at that at the same time while we're reading this, and then we'll go on to read the explanation, inshallah. So this is from Suratul Infitar, verse 10 to 12. So let's have a look. Suratul Infitar, give me a second to pull it up. There'll be another verse mentioned later as well. So it's the three verses from verse 10 to 10, including 10, 11 and 12. But we'll read 10 and 11 now. Actually, we'll just read all of them now to make it easier. So the Shaykh, he references these three verses. وَإِنَّ عَلَيْكُمْ لَحَافِظِينَ كِرَامًا كَاتِبِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ مَا تَفْعَلُونَ. So, but verily over you are appointed angels in charge of mankind to watch you. Kiraman, honorable, katibin, writing down your deeds. They know all that you do. So the Shaykh, he begins with this. This is from the original text, and then the rest of it is an explanation. So let's go through that. قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى باب ما جاء في كثرة الكلام. كثرة الكلام مذموم إلا ما كان معتنيا صاحبه بضبطه بحيث يأتني بما يقول وينتبه لما يتلفظ به ألا يكون فيه محرم أو ألا يكون فيه محرم أو مكروه أو مخالفة لشرع الله تبارك وتعالى. وذلك أن المرأة إذا كان كثير الكلام لا يأمن من السقط في كلامه والزلل. قد قال عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه من كثر كلامه كثر سقطه ومن كثر سقطه قل حياؤه ومن قل حياؤه كثرت ذنوبه ومن كثرت ذنوبه فالنار أولى به. فكثرة الكلام تفضي بالإنسان إلى الوقوع في الزلل، ولهذا الأصل في الإنسان أن يحرص على عدم الكلام إلا في خير، كما مر معنا في الحديث من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. وجاء في الحديث عن نبينا عليه الصلاة والسلام أنه قال من صمت نجا. ليس معنى ذلك أن كل من تكلم هلك، بل من تكلم بالخير نجا ومن تكلم بالشر هلك. لكن إذا كان الإنسان مكثرا في الكلام ثرثارا لا يأمن من الزلل، والكلمة قبل أن يتكلم بها المرء يملكها، أما إذا تكلم بها ملكته وتحمل تبعتها. So in this long paragraph, the Shaykh, he opens and he mentions the chapter about speaking a lot, and the Shaykh says that speaking a lot is something that's frowned upon, something that's looked down upon, and that's in particular with somebody who's not precise with his speech. So we're talking about people who are talking without thinking, and they just talk a lot, and they're not precise with their speech, they're not measured with their speech, it's just talking and talking. And the Shaykh says, from the point or perspective that the person's not thinking about what they're saying, are they, like, as in what we discussed in the previous lesson, am I going to say, is this whatever comes out of my mouth of words or speech, is it going to be haram? Is it correct for me to say, as a person who's measuring this particular person who speaks a lot without thinking in this way will make a lot of errors? This is what the Shaykh is saying, that the person isn't measured in their speech and not precise. And then the Shaykh says that a person, if they're speaking a lot and they talk a lot, then they're not safe and secure from falling into error and mistakes. And then the Shaykh brings the saying of Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, and this is what we read as well in the last lesson. So let's have a look at that again as a reminder, or serve as a good reminder. So where Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, said, whoever's speech increases, so whoever talks a lot and their speech increases, then so will their errors, like as in the chance of errors going to increase. And whoever's errors increase, or they make mistakes because of what they say, because of talking a lot, then their modesty, they don't have modesty, their modesty will decrease. And whoever's modesty decreases, then his sins increase. And whoever sins increase, then they're more deserved of the fire. So if you remember, we mentioned that, we went through that last week. So then the Shaykh, he continues and he says, so whoever speech increases, it leads them, it's a reason, and it leads to them, it causes the person to fall into mistakes and errors, and that's why the Shaykh says that this foundation, the foundation or foundational principle, that striving to speak less is better. So striving to speak less is better, and if you speak, then speak that which is good. And as we went over this hadith as well last week, whoever believes in Allah on the last day, then speak good or remain silent. And also the Shaykh mentions another hadith here of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he mentioned whoever remains silent has succeeded, or is saved. So whoever remains silent is saved. The Shaykh says this doesn't mean that whoever speaks is destroyed, but rather he says whoever speaks with good is saved, and whoever speaks with evil is destroyed. However, he goes on to say, however, if a person who speaks a lot and is always talking, good habit of talking a lot, this person is not secure and safe from falling into error. And then the Shaykh, he says he says that when a person, for example, is measured in their speech, they think carefully before they speak, they think about, they weigh things up before they say something, then this person, before those words leave your mouth, you have that ownership over them, you have control over them, let's say, but once they leave, you no longer have that control. Once they've left your mouth and somebody else has heard whatever you said or whatever it might be, and that's it, it's done, the deed's done. So what the Shaykh is saying here is that while we have control of what we're saying, i.e. before we say it, then let's do the work there, because once the words come out, then you no longer have control over those words, because the deed has been done. So let's continue, inshallah. أورد رحمه الله قول الله عز وجل وإن عليكم لحافظين كراما كاتبين يعلمون ما تفعلون. وهذا فيه أن أقوال الإنسان كلها من جملة عمله المكتوب عليه المحصى عليه الذي يحاسب عليه يوم يقف بين يدي الله جل وعلا يوم القيامة. وإذا استحضر العاقل أن كلامه من جملة عمله عني بصيانة كلامه وحفظ من منطقه. وإذا غفل الإنسان عن هذا المعنى لم يبالي بما يتكلم به. ولهذا ينبغي على العبد أن يكون هذا المعنى حاضرا في ذهنه. وإن عليكم لحافظين كراما كاتبين. ومما يكتب على المرء كلامه. وقد مر معنا أيضا قول الله سبحانه وتعالى ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد. الآية. So then the Shaykh mentions those three verses that we went through earlier, which is a reference to the angels that write everything down. They write everything down. One on the right side, one on the left side. One writes all the good deeds, the other one writes all the bad deeds. Everything's recorded. This is what the Shaykh mentions here as he brought evidence for us to reflect on. Then he says here that the Shaykh says that here when the person everything that the person says. So for example, we're talking about speech here. So everything that the person says is recorded. It's written. And the person is going to be held accountable for everything that they said when they stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, on the day of standing. So if the person uses their intellect and realizes that this is going to happen and understands that the speech about the brevity of person's speech, you can get them in hot water, and that it's action. It's also action, because whatever you say on your tongue is action. Then the person, if they comprehend all of this, they will know that they need to preserve and take care of what they say and what comes out from their mouths, as in what they talk about and what they say. But if a person is heedless of this, if they don't care and they're heedless, then it doesn't matter, because they'll just say whatever they want, and they'll say it'll be all unmeasured, and as mentioned earlier in the previous paragraph, it's not going to end well for them. So the Shaykh says it's upon the servant of Allah to keep it at the forefront of his or her mind. You got to keep it at the forefront of your mind about speaking. When you speak, it should be measured, and that these verses should be at the forefront of our mind. These verses that the Shaykh brought, reminding us about the angels that are writing everything down, and ultimately that's going to be an evidence either for us or against us on the day of judgment, when we are accounted for what we did of speech and action. So this is what the Shaykh mentions, and then he also mentions a previous verse also, which I believe was mentioned in a previous lesson, not too far in the past, from Surah Al-Qaf, verse 18. And if you have a look at that again, just as a reminder, then let's have a look at the English meaning of that. Let me just pull this up. Surah Al-Qaf. Here we go. Verse 18. Not a word does he or she utter, but there is a watcher by him ready to record it. And so that goes in with the previous evidence that's come here as well. So let's continue inshallah. قال رحمه الله تعالى عن المغيرة بن شعبة رضي الله عنه مرفوعا إن الله حرم عليكم عقوق الأمهات ووعد البنات ومنع المهات وكره لكم ثلاثا قيل وقال وكثرة السؤال وإضاءة المال أخرجاه. So let's have a look at this hadith, and this is on the authority of Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah. So let's have a look at this. Give me a second to translate it for you. Allah has made it prohibited for you to be disrespectful, showing undutiful behavior to your mothers, to bury your daughters alive. And this is what the pagan Arabs used to do. Yeah, they used to bury their daughters alive. To refuse others their dues, and to demand things from others which are not worth demanding, and he hates that you engage in gossip, asking many questions about people's affairs, and wasting wealth. And this is a hadith that's agreed upon. Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, yeah. Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. So that's what, when it's agreed upon, that's what it usually means. Right, let's continue. Let's go through the explanation. قال عن المغيرة ابن شعبة رضي الله عنه مرفوعا إن الله حرم عليكم عقوق الأمهات. العقوق هو القطيعة وعدم البر والوفاء مع من هي أكثر الناس إحسانا إليه ورعاية له وقياما على مصالحه وتعبا في تنشئته وتربيته. حملته أمه كرها ووضعته كرها وحمله وفصاله 30 شهرا. سورة الأحقاف. كم هي المعاناة التي بذلتها الأم والجهد الجهيد الذي قامت به عملا على تنشئة ابنها ووليدها. ولهذا خص في الحديث الأمهات، قال عقوق الأمهات، مع أن العقوق محرم حتى مع الآباء، لكن خص الأمهات لعظيم حقهن. ولهذا جاء في الحديث قال من أبر، قال أمك، قال ثم من، قال أمك، قال ثم من، قال أمك، قال ثم من، قال ثم أباك. وقال في الحديث الآخر من أحق الناس بحسن صحابتي، قال أمك، قال ثم من، قال أمك، قال ثم من، قال أمك، قال ثم من، قال ثم أبوك. لأن حق الأم أعظم. العقوق كله محرم، لكن عقوق الأم من أشنع العقوق وأشده. وكيف يكون العقوق مع من حملته 9 أشهر وعانت عند وضعه ووضعته كرها، وعانت أيضا عند رضاعته، وسهرت عليه الليالي وتعبت، ثم يقابل هذا الجميل العظيم والإحسان الكبير بالعقوق والإساءة. والله عز وجل أمر بين الوالدين وأوجبه وجعله قرينا لحقه سبحانه وتعالى في أكثر من آية في القرآن. قال الله عز وجل وقضى ربك ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا. وقال جل وعلا واعبدوا الله ولا تشركوا به شيئا وبالوالدين إحسانا. وقال جل وعلا قل تعالوا أتلوا ما حرم ربكم عليكم أن لا تشركوا به شيئا وبالوالدين إحسانا. وقال جل وعلا أن اشكر لي ولوالديك. فقرن حقهما سبحانه وتعالى بحقه، كما أن عقوق الوالدين مقرون بالشرك بالله سبحانه وتعالى. قد مر معنا في الحديث ألا أنبئكم بأكبر الكبائر؟ قالوا بلى يا رسول الله. قال الإشراك بالله وعقوق الوالدين. فحق الوالدين قرين حق الله في كتاب الله، وقطيئة الوالدين وعقوق الوالدين قرين الشرك بالله والعياذ بالله. وخصت الأمهات هنا بالذكر لأن حق الأمهات أعظم. Okay, so let's go through this before we continue, because it's a long paragraph. So then the Shaykh explains this hadith, and it's a very important hadith. So let's take a look. So we'll go through it step by step, because there's a lot here. So the Shaykh, he says that Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, may Allah be pleased with him, he said that Allah has made it prohibited for you to be disrespectful, showing undutiful behavior to your mothers. And then the Shaykh explains, he says, this undutiful and disrespectful behavior, it's like cutting, for example, cutting ties, cutting yourself away from your mothers, for example. Parents in general, but mothers. And we'll see why that's being mentioned here as we go along, we'll see, inshallah. And it's showing a lack of it's showing disrespect and not being honorable and dutiful and helpful and being good with your parents, with your mother, and with your parents in general. Why? Because parents, and particularly let's just focus on the mother for now, that our mothers, they take care of us. They've done everything when we were babies. They carried us. This is what the Shaykh brings. So they carried us. They strove in our upbringing, in our development and our upbringing, and done everything they can to benefit us. And that which benefits us, they've done whatever they can that helps us as children and growing up. And then the Shaykh, he brings a verse from the Quran. So let's have a look at that here to tie in what he's saying. So this is from Surah Al-Ahqaf, verse 15. Let's go there. And it's the beginning part of it, but let's read it. And we have enjoined on man to be dutiful and kind to his parents. His mother bears him with hardship, and she brings him forth with hardship. And the bearing of him and the weaning of him is 30 months. So this is the part that the Shaykh brought. And the Shaykh says, how much care and effort has this mother put in for her child, and all the striving that she's gone through, from when she was pregnant to the point of bringing the child up, bringing you up, your development, nurturing you, everything. And the Shaykh says that's why the mother was specifically mentioned like this in this hadith, as in being disrespectful to your mothers, being undutiful to your mothers. Even though we know that being undutiful to the fathers as well is haram, is not allowed. But the Shaykh says it's been specified here because of the great right that they have, because of what they've gone through. And this is why the Shaykh says that it came in the two hadiths, and I'll just mention the meaning of them, about where the Prophet ﷺ was asked, who has more right for me to be dutiful to and be good with in dealings, and as what we're talking about, this topic of dealing with parents, or in particular the mother. And what did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, your mother, and then he was asked, and then who? And he said, your mother, and then he was asked, then who? And then for the third time he said, your mother, and then he was asked, then who? For the fourth time, and then the fourth time it was your father. So 3 times your mother and once your father. And that's showing the great right that the mother has, the great magnificent right that the mother has because of what she went through. So the Shaykh says this, and he says, because being undutiful to parents, mother and father, is haram, is wrong. But it's even worse when it happens to the mother. It's worse and more severe. And then the Shaykh says, how can this undutiful behavior come about, and disrespectful behavior come about when your mother carried you for 9 months, strove for you, helped you, struggled, and then you were born, and then even more struggle, bringing you up, feeding you, everything, as we know. Well, the mother has a great role, and an important role, and a hard role, of course. Nurturing you when you were young. So, and it's tiring, and all those, restless nights. And then a person turns around and is undutiful to their parents, specifically their mother. How can it be? And so that's why um, the mother has a greater right, and that's why when the mother is being having to deal with undutiful behavior, it's worse. And so then the Shaykh says that Allah has made obligatory for us to deal with our parents with good behavior and good manners, and help them and be dutiful to them. And this has been mentioned in more than one verse, and we read a few of them. We read a few of them that they mentioned here. So the first one is from Surah Al-Isra, and you can refer to the full ayah yourselves. Surah Al-Isra verse 23, then it was Surah Al-Nisa verse 36, then it was Surah Al-An'am verse 151, and finally it was Surah Al-Luqman verse 14. And all of these verses refer to the being dutiful to one's parents. This is what the Shaykh's mentioning here. And also that with and another point to mention here, the Shaykh mentioned this before, I believe, I think it was in this book or a different book, but anyway, important thing to mention here as well, that the Shaykh does remind us of, is that if we look at these verses and we study them, these particular ones that we just mentioned now, then we'll see that Allah has connected shirk with Allah with being undutiful to parents, and these things are linked and they're serious. So straight after mentioning the prohibition of shirk and polytheism, then comes the undutifulness to the parents. So these two things, obviously shirk is shirk, as we know, it's that'll take you out of the fold of Islam, major shirk. But then we also have this major issue about being undutiful to parents, and it's a big thing, it's a grave thing, and we need to avoid it, inshallah. And we need to make sure we have it at the forefront of our minds. So then the Shaykh continues, and he says, let me just finish this paragraph here, and he mentions what I've just said there, and he says that that this is a great right of our parents, that we be dutiful to them, and we deal with them in a good manner. And the Shaykh says here, finally, in the final sentence of this paragraph that we're currently reading, that he says here that why was the mother mentioned in this way, like 3 times in the hadith, and the way the Shaykh has explained it, is because because mothers have a greater right, because of the struggles that they go through more than the father. Let's carry on. So we'll finish in the next 5 minutes, inshallah, and then we'll finish the rest of this booklet. We're almost, you can see, 35 out of 42 pages. We'll finish it off next week, inshallah. قال ووأد البنات أي قتلهن ودفنهن وهن حياة. قد كان أهل الشرك أهل الجاهلية الأولى يكرهون البنات كرها شديدا، وإذا بشر أحدهم بالأنثى ظل وجهه مسودا وهو كظيم يتوارى من القوم من سوء ما بشر به أيمسكه على هون أم يدسه في التراب. Surah Al-Nahl verse 58 and 59. We'll go through that in a second, inshallah. فكان الواحد منهم إذا رزق بنتا يشتد غمه ويعظم همه ويزداد كربه ويتوارى من الناس يختفي من سوء ما بشر به ثم يبقى متحيرا بين أمرين، إما أن يبقيها على هون على كراهة وعلى بغض وعلى مضض، أو يدسه في التراب. وكان بعضهم من شدة كراهيته للأنثى كما ذكر في كتب الأخبار وكتب التاريخ إذا جاء وقت الوضع حفر حفر حفرة عميقة. وقت الولادة يحفر حفرة عميقة ويجلس، فإذا وضعت إن قيل ولد أبقاه، وإن قيل أنثى مباشرة في الحفرة. تدفن ويحال عليها التراب. تدفن ويحال عليها التراب، ما تبقى في الدنيا ولا دقيقة واحدة من شدة الكراهية الشديدة، وبعضهم ربما صبر عليها السنة وسنتين وثلاث، ثم قال لأمها جمليها طيبيها حسنيها، ثم أخذها معه كأنه يفسحها أو يمتعها، وقد حفر لها حفرة ثم يدفعها فيها ويهيل عليها التراب. وإذا الموءودة سئلت بأي ذنب قتلت. And that's from Surah Al-Takbir, verse 8 to 9. So let's go through this and then we'll finish, inshallah. So then we go through the next part of the hadith, which is in reference to burying daughters alive, and this is a practice of the pagans even today. It's a practice of the pagans. This is what they used to do, and this is what they still do. And the Shaykh says, what does that mean? وَوَعْدَ الْبَنَاتِ. It means burying the daughters alive. So burying the daughters alive. And the Shaykh mentions here that the people of shirk and the people of ignorance, they hate daughters, like severely. They hate having daughters. They hate it. And then the Shaykh brings an evidence from the Quran. Let's have a look. Let's read this, inshallah, from Surah An-Nahl, verse 58 to 59. Let's go through this. And when the news of the birth of a female child is brought to any of them, his face becomes dark and he is filled with inward grief. He hides himself from the people because of the evil of the whereof he has been informed. Shall he keep her with dishonor or bury her in the earth? Certainly evil is their decision. So that's the whole verse I read, but this is what the Shaykh brings. And the Shaykh says that, he explains here, he says that one of them, if they are, if they bestowed with a daughter, for example, and a daughter is born, they become sad, they grieve, and that increases, and they feel that they're in a problem, and they hide from the people because they feel as if it's shameful, as also the ayah that we read the meaning of, and so then they're in this state, and they're like, they're between two choices. Should we keep this daughter, this child, and live in shame, or should we bury her and get rid of her, basically, in so many words. And this is what they used to do. They used to bury. So the Shaykh says that they used to bury their daughters like this, either straight away, at the point of birth, where if it was announced that it was a male, a boy, they'd keep the baby. But if it was announced a daughter, a female, they'd have at the ready a small pit or a hole in the ground, and they just bury straight away. This is what they used to do. And some would just carry the shame, which they thought was shame. Obviously, it's not shameful at all, obviously, but from their perspective, they would maybe let things carry on for a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, like this, and then they would bury. So it wasn't always straight away, but it depended on probably their circumstances or whatever it was. So this is what the Shaykh has mentioned here. And then the Shaykh also mentions another ayah at the end of this paragraph. So let's have a look at that. Two verses, yeah, verse 8 and verse 9 from Surah Al-Takwir. Let's go there. Surah Al-Takwir. And when the female infant buried alive, as the pagan Arabs used to do, shall be questioned for what sin she was killed. So this is what the Shaykh brings, because this is directly related to what these people used to do, or what these groups of people used to do, and what actually in fact still happens today with pagans and mushriks. So inshallah we'll stop there, and we'll continue inshallah with the rest of the hadith and the explanation next week inshallah ta'ala. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.